everybody. Welcome back to From the Suggestion Box, navigating feedback, the good, the bad, and the say what? Not letting the good stuff go to your head and the bad stuff go to your heart. I am so excited to have my special guest here today, Mr. Barry Altland. He is a writer, speaker, nonprofit executive, and thought leader, and published author of the book, Engaging the Head, Heart, and Hands of a Volunteer, a simple guide for feeding the passion of those who serve. Barry blends rich experience in the for-profit space with numerous experiences as a volunteer and leader of volunteers to bring a unique perspective on volunteer engagement and learner engagement. And I have had the privilege of sitting under some of Barry's webinars. So I am so thrilled to have him here as a guest. Barry, thank you so much for joining me today.
Nicole, it's my pleasure to be here and to be with all of your followers.
Yes. So let's just dive right in. So let's talk about feedback. So before I ask about any particular feedback that you have received or you have given, I know you have a very different perspective on feedback. So I just want to go ahead and start with that. And I'm going to just turn it over to you. Tell me about your perspective of feedback.
Yeah, Nicole, and I'm so glad that you asked, because my background, I come actually from the corporate side of the world, and because I live in Orlando, I'm a theme parks guy. So I wasn't with the big theme park, but with the second largest theme park, and I was with them for many years and doing leadership development with that organization. And when I was there, it became evident to me, because I came from the operations side and then moved over into the learning and development side. It became evident that a lot of leaders need help in this really simple, but yet foundational expectation of providing feedback to their team members. So I set about developing a really simple model, and I call it the RBI and the BIF feedback model. So RBI stands for recognition, behavior, and impact. And those are the three elements that need to be present anytime that we choose to offer feedback to another. And that's when they're doing something well, and we want to see them continue to do those things.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you clarified that. You said RBI, and I heard, all I thought was baseball. I was like, runs batted in now.
Yes. It's a mnemonic. That's exactly what you're supposed to do. And in workshops, Nicole, I do this all the time. I say, hey, so for those of you that know anything about baseball, when you hear RBI, what do you think of? And your answer would be?
Runs batted in.
Yeah, and that's a good thing. And we want to see runs batted in. We want to see the RBIs happen over and over. So that's the mnemonic. That reminds us that when something is happening that's good and we want to see it repeated, then you use the RBI variation of the model. Whereas, and let's go with that. Let's go with the mnemonic, because the variation for when things are not going well and you want to provide feedback for improvement is behavior impact future, or BIF. Biff. So when you hear Biff, what do you think of?
Back to the Future.
Yeah, exactly, as most people do. Yeah. So and Biff, and I'd say, okay, what kind of character was Biff? What do you think?
Yeah, he was not a nice guy. He was very much a bully and clearly didn't get a lot of love at home.
So yes, and I would shape whatever response I got, and I would say, yeah, Biff is one who needed to change his behavior. So the BIF, the BIF variation of the model, suggests that that's what we would, as leaders, use whenever we would like to see a change in behaviors. So behavior, impact, and then the future. So I would describe what behavior I saw, I describe the impact of that behavior, and then I'd make a recommendation for what that person might do in the future instead. So it's a really simple model, and I love to introduce it because it's so easy to embrace and to put into action. And what it ultimately does, Nicole, and this is the cool thing, is that it gets leaders to a place where they realize that all feedback is good.
See, and that's powerful. That's very powerful, because, and I know we talk about it often a lot on this podcast, where we're talking about negative feedback and positive feedback. But what you're saying is there's maybe no really such thing as negative feedback, that it's all pretty positive. It's just a matter of how you're going about it or how you're looking at it. Is that what you're trying
Yeah,
to say?
that's exactly what I'm trying to say. Hey, there are negative ways to deliver feedback. And let's be clear about that, because it's an art, it's a science, it's a skill. It's something that most every leader needs to keep working on to be able to really develop and hone the skill to do it well. But when they are crafting, artful feedback to their team members, I do believe that it's nothing but good. Because when we let somebody know, hey, you're doing well, and we want to recognize them for their efforts, our words can be really powerful, and that's a positive message. And we want to, guide their performance or redirect their behavior in some way, really focusing on improvement. Well, a message of improvement, that's pretty positive as well. So it's all about how we package what we offer to our team members that really makes a big difference.
So let me ask you this. Um, I've heard a lot of people, as we've had conversations on this podcast, talk about the how do they call it? Like the compliment sandwich. Like you give them a compliment and then you tell them like whatever that area of improvement was, and then go back to compliment again. Like, so what are your feelings and thoughts on that?
Oh, if you couldn't tell by my facial expression right there,
You love it,
yeah,
right?
it's funny because in nearly every workshop that I have facilitated, somebody will raise their hand and say, well, what do you think about that? Or I've always been told that. And I say yes, and we honor that once upon a time may have been thought to be an effective model. But as we talk through it with groups, people will acknowledge that that mixed message will leave the recipient of the feedback a little bit confused, or quite possibly it leaves the message open to their interpretation. And let's face it, let's be honest, that what some of us, by our wiring, we're only going to hear the good part at the beginning, the bread, but we won't hear the meat in between, which might have been the more substantive portion of that feedback. And then some others are going to toss away the bread and only hear what may be, and when I draw this on a flip chart, I always do the triangle
Yeah.
for the delta, so that's a change, in project management language. But I am not a proponent of that style of feedback, because I do believe that it's disingenuous. It doesn't deliver a clear message that lets that person know where they stand in your heart.
Okay, so can we do like a sample practice? Can we practice? I want you to practice with me. So I'm gonna be a volunteer who habitually shows up late. So how do you have that conversation with me?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
wait,
I would,
and on
yeah.
top of that, I'm sorry. On top of that, I'm known to have a very short fuse and like to get a quick attitude when people try to tell me something about myself. Okay, now go.
Well, okay, so now that you've introduced that, we're actually talking about two different challenges here.
Okay.
And I often get this. I get this from leaders, especially as they're earlier in their emerging status. They're developing as a leader, and they will begin to factor those kind of things, those things that they know, the personality traits and the characteristics of the person who will receive the feedback. And what they'll do potentially is they let it dissuade them from offering the feedback at all. And that's what I really safeguard our leaders to say, well, hold on a second. Just because that person's not well equipped to receive that feedback doesn't mean that they don't deserve the feedback.
Ooh.
So yeah, I am going to be extra ginger, very gentle in the way that I deliver this, and say, hey, Nicole, I noticed that there were several instances, and I can likely name off the specific instances when you were not able to arrive on time in the past 2 weeks. And what I'd like to let you know is that when you're not here on time, it has an impact on your team members. And then, of course, I could describe, given the scenario, I would describe more specifically what that is. It also has an impact on those we serve. And it's really important that all of our volunteers, and especially you, because you're a valued volunteer, that you are here at your scheduled time so that we can begin and we can serve at our best.
I like it.
Yeah, and if you were listening closely, what you were hearing there is I described the behavior,
Mhm.
and I also included the impact of that behavior, and I included a recommendation for the future. And
Yes.
if you really pay close attention, the phrases that I use are elements of the old school operant conditioning. So when you say I noticed that from a leadership perspective, you're letting that recipient know, hey, I'm aware of what's going on. I notice, I see what's happening. And then when you offer phrases like next time or in the future, what you're letting them know is we're not done here.
Yeah.
We're not parting ways. In fact, you are a a highly valued part of this team. And I covet that. And I want to make sure that you come back tomorrow with your spirit wholly intact. And that is so critical when we offer feedback, is making sure that we protect that person's heart, yet while still being honest with them. And yes, I do believe there is a way that we can do both of those at the same time.
Okay. I love that. That was really, really good. I like that. The BIF, right? Behavior, impact, future.
You
I
got
like
it.
that. I like that. I like that a lot. Okay. So, and you may have already answered this, but I'm going to ask it again. So, when you hear somebody say, we have to have difficult conversations with our volunteers, um, what about that is a trigger for you?
Yeah, it's a great question that you're asking because, and again, if we're talking about within the context of providing feedback on performance or on behavior, we really need to stop as leaders and think that through and consider if it really is a difficult conversation or if it's a conversation that's difficult for us. And
Hmm.
if it's the latter, then again, and I'm going to poke a little bit because I have some strong passions about this. We need to really ask ourselves if we're meant to be a leader, because I do believe that leaders, it's a non-negotiable in your role, is that maybe you're newer and you're rising in your leadership role, and you're not quite skilled at doing this yet, and that's okay. That's okay, but you're not afraid to try, and you're not afraid to make a few mistakes along the way, and you're probably going to step on a few toes. But that courage that it takes, that's what lets you know that maybe you've been called to be a leader. But if you're thinking, hey, I'm just going to steer around these conversations because they're difficult for me, then I really am going to ask you the leader, you the listener who is in a leadership role, have you really been called? Have you really been called to be a leader? Because if you have been, I do believe that you're going to work toward becoming comfortable with having those meaningful conversations, not difficult conversations, meaningful conversations.
And I like that. And I think that's a very, very valid question and way to put it out there, because if you are going to be a leader in any type of field, and especially in a manager, as a manager of volunteers, it's definitely something that you just have to be committed to working to get better at, because you're not going to be able to avoid it. And especially, I think, and this is just my own personal opinion, right? It's one thing to fire somebody who is like a paid employee and they're here to do a job, and they're not living up to the performance. And so, okay, you're not living up to your performance. Bye. But like, to somebody who is voluntarily giving their time and they don't have to be there anyway, and you're like, oh my gosh, I have to fire this person. It's like, to me personally, depending on the situation, it could be even that much more difficult. But like you said, are you willing as a leader to have the courage to do it, to save the integrity of your program, to save the integrity of your organization? Because just because somebody's giving it for free doesn't mean you have to take it. um, and so I really like that as that challenge, to be ready, right? Like, if you're not ready to step up to the challenge of that, then maybe this is not for you. However, if you are willing to do it and you realize and you recognize that this is a point in your leadership that you have to work on, then all right, let's do it. Let's get you to where you need to be. So I want to ask you a specific one, right? Um, and let's go back to firing a volunteer. Would you consider that a difficult conversation for the person, or is that like a difficult, when I say the person, I mean the person, like the volunteer manager or the leader who's having to have that conversation because they know they have to get rid of somebody who is not um, holding the holding up to their standards. And let's make it even more fun. Not It's not even somebody who's just capable, right, who maybe they just keep coming late and they don't care, but maybe it's one of those people who has been a volunteer at the center, or at the organization, maybe even before. They've been through 3 volunteer managers. They started when they were 40 and they're 85 now, and they're aging out, and this they've given 45 years of their life, but they're at the point to where they can no longer do the job function. And now you have to tell that person you can't serve anymore. Like, how is that not a difficult conversation to have?
Yeah. And it's so funny too. When I first began writing in 2014, I had a lot of folks who worked in the profession of volunteer engagement who were asking me is, are you going to include a section that discusses how to fire a volunteer? And my first answer was no. And probably my 10th answer was no, until I continued to hear that question. And then finally, I had to give it some additional thought and say, well, yes, I am going to include a section on this, but I'm not going to give those who were asking what they had hoped to receive, which was an easy ticket for just dismissing somebody. In fact, I've even suggested in my writing that we not talk about firing a volunteer. I use the term parting ways.
Okay.
It's a different way of thinking about it. It softens it. And again, what we really have to acknowledge is, because intrinsic drivers, intrinsic motivation is what is stirring in each and every heart of every volunteer. And that's what brought them there. That's what keeps them coming back. And it's the leader's responsibility to find out what that is. And only when they really deeply know what's stirring in that person's heart, maybe they'll get some insight into what's driving those behaviors that have brought you to that point. So as I tackled this section in my writing, what I did is I offered a really simple model, but 5 of the 6 potential solutions point back to the leader and what the leader could have been doing and should have been doing all along that course leading up to this decision point where, like, okay, hey, now we just need to part ways with this individual. And the one option that does not point back to the leader is when that volunteer has made a willful choice to go against the mission of the organization.
Okay.
Otherwise, I do believe that there are leadership practices and principles that can be in place that can guide and redirect all sorts of performance and behavioral issues that should, I'm going to use an old Barney Fife term, should nip it in the bud long before it ever gets to the level where we feel like we need to part ways. So I'm going to boldly suggest that there's a percentage of leaders that have gotten to that point because they've neglected the circumstances up until that point, and then they finally they're ready to blow a gasket and say, hey, no, I can't deal with this anymore. This person has to go. And again, it's a different way of thinking about it. It's looking within as a leader and saying, what should I be doing? What could I be doing that is different to help guide this individual in their performance and their behavior to help them stay mission aligned? And I know that sounds very fluffy and idealistic, but I believe in it. And I know that it's possible, and it will address a high percentage of the challenges that will someday lead us to this feeling that we have to part ways with a volunteer.
Right. That is so good. And so, because I'm thinking already of different things that I have been learning of how to, like you said, nip it in the bud and adjust certain things, so especially so you don't get to the point where you were at that point where you're just like, this person's got to go. Yeah. But I also want to throw out something a little bit. I also want to throw a curveball, if you will. Um, what about the person who is still mission oriented, who has always done everything you've ever asked? But let's just say, like, because I operate with a lot of volunteers in the theater, and one of the requirements is that they have to be able to stand for long hours at a time. And some of our volunteers are older to where they can't stand as long as they used to, or they don't read the ticket properly, or they're sending people in the wrong direction. And it's just like, and their heart is in the right place and they're trying to do their best, but they physically just can no longer do the job. Like, those are the ones that are hard for me, because it's like they didn't technically do anything wrong, they're just not capable of the job function anymore.
Yeah, and it's funny that you mentioned that because my wife actually just started this past year during the pandemic timeframe, volunteering at the Garden Theater, which is all of 4 blocks from my home.
Nice.
It's one of the most amazing community theaters in the state of Florida, no doubt. But and we talk about some of these scenarios because she's serving there as a volunteer, and I totally get what you're describing. And the first thing that came to mind for that person, especially if they've been serving there for a while, is why don't we create what I would call an emeritus status, where we're able to honor them, but yet still in a most delicate and respectful way pasture them out of serving in that capacity, and be able to their here's my feeling, here's my notion, is that they are likely at some level within them aware
Yeah.
that their skills are declining, that maybe they're just not a 100% match for the role any longer. So finding a gentle way to have that honest conversation, but yet still in the public eye, helping them to maintain their dignity through that process, send them out into your community as an absolute ambassador for your theater, for your operation, for you, the leader. Those are the really key parts. And that's true for your theater. That's true for any volunteer supported organization, is that person's going to go out and talk to people, and what they say, even if you part ways, what they say about you and your organization matters.
Yes.
So you as a leader, you're like, I don't care what other people say. Well, you must care what people say
Yeah.
in your community. If you're a community organization who's volunteer supported, you must care about what others say. And so that's the first thing that comes to mind in that situation that you offer, is maybe there's an emeritus status, a way to honor that individual. Maybe there's a plaque on the wall. Maybe there's free tickets for them, for them, their spouse or a significant other or a friend to come to shows in the future. There's a way to gently ease them out of the role. And it's still not a difficult conversation. It's a meaningful conversation.
I love it. So everybody, the new synonym for difficult is meaningful. Love it. Okay. So now that we've talked about all this goodness, I want to talk about some things that have happened to you that got you to where you are, because you didn't arrive here. You worked up to this. So do you have any examples of any type of either crazy feedback that you received that was just like nutso and you had no idea what the person was talking about? Or maybe, as an emerging leader yourself, you thought you were doing something really good and you gave what you thought was the most amazing feedback and it landed like a foul ball, like over home plate. Like, talk to me.
Yeah, there is a moment that comes to mind, and I think it's really important to share this example because it is critical for us as leaders to understand how important trust is in the feedback relationship. Because this particular feedback was in the context of a 360. So some of you who are in the corporate world, you probably know what a 360 is. And this was in the early stages. So not mentioning the organization, but they might be theme park. It might not be the largest theme park in Central Florida, but I was on a team, and the team had some toxic elements. And I'm not gonna lie, I might have been a contributor to that toxicity because I didn't at that stage in my career, I didn't know how to rise above it. So I got sucked into it. So I was every bit as much a part of it. I'm not going to disown that. So I do remember receiving feedback, and I can't even remember specifically what the words were, but I remember having this meaningful conversation with my leader, the person to whom I reported. And I remembered saying these words. This is what I do recall vividly. I said, "What am I supposed to do with that?" And that is for since that time forward, it's what sticks out in my mind is that any sort of feedback that we offer to others, they should never be able to ask that question. They should never be able to say, what am I supposed to do with that? Feedback is ideally, it's meant to be embraced and implemented, to be applied so that that person can either keep doing the good things or to redirect and make some changes around the areas that need improvement. That should never be a question. The question of what am I supposed to do with it should never be a question that a feedback recipient can ask. So that's what I took away from this, and I remembered thinking, how dare that person take a pot shot at me? It was a jab, and what it did, instead of building trust, it further degraded the trust within the team. And again, it's exactly the opposite of what feedback should accomplish within a team environment, and exactly what you as a leader should be accomplishing when you provide feedback to your volunteers. Is it should be part of the trust building process.
Love it. Man, did y'all hear that? Did y'all write? If not, rewind and write that down, because that's some good stuff right there. Oh, I love that. They should never be able to say, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, thank you, but oh, that's good. That is so good. That is so good. That's just like a really great like litmus to use. I'm processing. That's why I'm like stuck here for a minute, because that's good stuff right there. I like that a lot. Okay. Whew. Okay. So general question. What is the like largest team, like the number of people, like the largest team that you've ever had the opportunity to manage?
Yeah, it's in the hundreds.
Okay.
And this goes back to my early career. So again, I was in the for-profit side. I came from a hospitality background, and there was once a point when I had 150 people reporting directly to me.
Okay.
And I'm sharing this because I hear this so often in workshop environments, because I extol the value of developing coaching relationships, which, coaching in a really simple way is just sitting down periodically and having those meaningful conversations with your team members to find out what's going on in here. And I invariably, somebody within that workshop will raise their hand and say, well, I have 400 volunteers who report directly to me. And dollars to donuts, I will look them in the eye. And again, I'm pretty unabashed because I'm at a point in my life where I'm really comfortable with what I know. And I say to that person, I said, on behalf of your organization, I apologize. I'm sorry that you've been placed in that position, because let's be honest, in the corporate space, in the year 2020, would we ever have 400 paid employees reporting to one person?
Sure.
We all know the answer is no. So why would we do that to a leader of volunteer engagement when we recognize that their heart, the individual heart, and the passions and the intrinsic motivators and all of these things, this cocktail that's stirring in our hearts, when that matters so much, why would we put any leader in that position where they're set up for failure?
Yeah.
It just makes no sense to me. So I will literally apologize to that person. I said, on behalf of your organization, I'm sorry. You deserve better than that. Every leader deserves better than to be placed in that role where they just are incapable of building relationships with people.
especially with so many, I mean, unless that was literally like your only job, but we all know that that's one small part of all the rest of everything else that we're having to do as well. So, which can make it challenging, but not impossible. It might take a little bit longer, but it's just a matter of one of those things where we just have to be tenacious about it and stick to it. Because it is what it is. But like I said, we still have to just do our best with what it is. But I love that you acknowledge that for us. At the very least, everybody like take that part out and like play it for your boss. No, I'm just kidding.
But Nicole, I also recognize that me saying that in a workshop environment doesn't fix anything. So what I follow that with is that if I'm talking about coaching and I'm talking about developing meaningful relationships, and you have 400 people and you're thinking, how do I even begin? I suggest start somewhere. Start somewhere and think about the word that I use in my writing is, who are your dedicated volunteers? And in every organization, you'll define that word differently, or that category of volunteers, you'll define them differently, but start there. Maybe it's just a handful. You know your inner circle, you know those individuals who you can rely on. They're there, they're the high impact players. Start there. Start to build those relationships. Maybe you already have, and if you have, fantastic. Branch out from there, add a few more to the circle, and then keep going until you're really touching a critical mass of your team, and you get those insights that you need to help those people stay aligned with doing something that brings meaning to them.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so good. And that's so good because especially for those of us who manage large groups of volunteers like that, like we all know that, like you're preaching to the choir. We all know, we're like, oh, we know that. We're not the ones who need to hear that. But I love just like you acknowledging that. And, this might be the first time anybody has ever apologized to us for that type of behavior. And it might not be coming from our organization, but just the fact that somebody acknowledges that that's not okay. Thank you. Thank you for that. Like, it's greatly appreciated. And then being able to follow up with like kind of, do the best that you can, start somewhere, because doing something is better than doing nothing. And that effort cannot be discounted in any way. Oh man, this is good stuff. Okay, so I'm transitioning. Next question. So far in life, what has been your greatest accomplishment? The thing that you are the most proud of?
Wow.
Professionally or personally, whatever.
Is it okay to say that I don't know if I've achieved that yet?
Okay.
I don't know. That's a really challenging question for me, because as I've always been wired this way, that birthdays and anniversaries and holidays and all these things, they've never really meant that much to me. And here's the reason why: because I believe in celebrating every day. Mm-hmm. So I that's where I land when it comes to those celebrations. And when I think about those most significant accomplishments, I think about the day-to-day things. Maybe I touched a life, maybe I made somebody smile, maybe I shared a kind word at a grocery store. Those are the things that to me mean more than any sort of award or accomplishment or any other achievement like that. So Nicole, let me just share an example, because this is a pride point for me.
Okay.
For the last 7, 8, 9 years, I couldn't even tell you how long I've been doing it, I referee youth soccer.
Love it.
And I love to do it because I take all of these behavioral principles that I've immersed myself in learning about for my entire career, and I apply them with 9 through 13-year-olds. and I get to see that they actually work.
Yeah.
But it's not just the reward of connecting with a young person and being able to see them grow in the moment. It's when a fan, and those fans are parents or grandparents, when they see it and they recognize it and they walk over to me after the game, and every time I see them approaching, I'm like, oh no, here it comes. Yeah. There's a fan who's going to give me a piece of their mind. Well, nearly every single time, despite my bracing for something different, they come over and say a kind word. And they let me know that they notice that I care about the young people and that I'm out there to not just blow the whistle at them, but to help them learn and to help them to grow so that they can do something different and better in their future. And boy, those moments mean a ton to me.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. That's awesome. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay. Woo! There's been a lot of good stuff in here. People are gonna have to rewind and watch this at least 3 or 4 times. Good stuff, good stuff. Okay, so we get to one of my favorite parts. I have this book, 3,000 questions.
Yes, yeah, sure.
Okay, so I want you to pick a number between 1 and 3,000, but not 7 or 77, because people always choose that number. So a number between 1 and 3,000, and I will ask you the question, and then if you don't like it, we can change it. So you answer
All right.
and then I answer.
Sounds good. I'm a gamer. We'll go with it. Let's go 1-5-1-5. 15-15.
15-15.
Let's do that. And let's see what I feel like I'm spinning the wheel and see what we come up with here.
See what we come up with. All righty, here we go. I like this one. Could you ever be someone's bodyguard?
Oh, wow. Of course, I'm having Kevin Costner thoughts in my head right now. So I can hear Whitney Houston's voice in my background playing the song. She's singing the Dolly Parton song. It's a Dolly Parton song.
The Dolly Parton, yes, let's get it straight. It's the Dolly Parton song that she gave Whitney permission to sing. And
and Whitney crushed it.
Very smart of Dolly. Now that's an entrepreneur right there, but that's a whole nother. Good job, Dolly.
Yeah, I think I could do that, and not because of my physical presence, but because I do believe, and I'm going to tie this back to the leadership realm.
Okay.
That I believe that I could do it because a bodyguard always needs to have their head on a swivel and be aware of their surroundings, and so does a leader. And a bodyguard is responsible for the care of another. And guess what? So is a leader. And for those reasons, I think I could do the bodyguard gig.
Oh, that was so good. That was so good. I was already like, nope, couldn't do it. Nope. Somebody see me coming. They're like, oh, look at this 5'2", tiny little. Well, man, when you put it that way, I think I have to change my answer. That was really good. Man. I still think it depends on who it is. But maybe, I don't know. Because if I am perceptive enough, then I can call in the big guy to go handle and take care of whatever. I don't necessarily have to be doing like the physical. Maybe I'm more like the Secret Service, but like incognito.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned the Secret Service because, I read those individuals, they come to mind because they are specifically called upon, again, drawing another analogy to leadership, they are called upon in that role to sacrifice self for the sake of whom they protect. And again, my writing is all centered around this really simple concept that I invented a word called otherliness.
Okay.
It's not really a word, but yet it shows up 67 times in this writing because I believe it's central to the role of a leader. It's not about you. It is not about you as the leader. It's about what you can do to serve others. So for all of those reasons, I do believe that anybody who's really called to be a leader should also fit pretty well in the bodyguard role as well.
That was so good. Man, that was good. Barry, how can we get your book? How can we get that?
Yeah. Amazon's a good way to go, or reach out to me directly. I'm so easy to find. Google me, or me on LinkedIn or whatever. Candidly, I'm a fan of Amazon. They do great work. They've made a huge change in our society. But from an author's perspective, I love placing my signature on a book and sending it to you directly from me, from my home address. So reach out to me, and we can take care of it. And I would love to share this resource because to me, putting it together was life-changing. And it's my hope that for a few who choose to read it, that it may change a bit of their life as well.
Man, well, it's already changed mine, and it's, I haven't even read it yet. I am definitely getting it. And I want to put out to there, for those of you who are watching, to those of you who are listening, listen to this, leave a comment. If you leave a comment on the episode, a review of this, then I will enter you into a drawing to get it. And I will purchase the book and have it sent to Barry. Well, I won't have to send it to him because he has them, and I will get you a personalized copy from him to you. So leave a comment in the, on the show notes, or if you're watching it on YouTube or whatever it is, and I will choose somebody to get the book. I'm personally going to get it myself because it sounds fabulous. And I mean, wow, what an amazing book for our leaders. So Barry, do you have any parting words, anything you want to share?
No, well, yes, I always have more to share, but just here is my parting thought to all of our peer leaders of volunteer engagement. And I know that there's an international following that I know that you're going to touch people from around the world who lead volunteers. And this is my challenge to you: is question everything. Question everything that we know, because coming from the corporate background and then making this migration over into the volunteer engagement space, here's what I can tell you is that some of the stuff that they're doing over there in the corporate world is absolutely a model practice, and we should be embracing it. But there's some other stuff that's happening over there that we should absolutely run from and do something entirely different, because it's not working over there, and shame on us if we think that it's going to work in the volunteer engagement space when our primary job is taking care of people's hearts.
Yeah.
So that's my challenge is, and I'm going to tell you, I'm a white dude who's 54, who was raised in a rural background in PA, not a wealthy family, not at all. But yet I have had to do some serious reading and reflection to understand where I am in this world, and everything regarding social justice and egalitarianism and all of the things that I believe in so deeply. I've had to accept that much of what I have known in my life, it's not the whole truth. And it's led me to this place where I question everything. So that's my advice to others: is don't be afraid to question everything.
And with that being said, thank you for joining us for this episode of From the Suggestion Box. I don't even know if I can say my tag anymore. The good, the bad, and I don't know. I may have to rethink this now. Thank you for joining us for From the Suggestion Box. The good, the bad, and the say what? Not letting the good stuff go to your head and the bad stuff go to your heart. Barry, thank you so much. Man,
it's my honor.
Amazing. To those of you who are watching, again, make sure to leave a comment below and everything that you learned and what you loved about this, and you will be entered in to win one of his books. So with that being said, we will see you next time. Subscribe so that you don't miss out, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.